This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Welcome to First Alert Weather Beyond the Green Screen, our Arizona's Family podcast. I'm meteorologist April Warnecke, and this is my very first podcast. Decided I was going to talk about April's Arizona bucket list. This is a passion project of mine that I started a couple years ago here on Arizona's Family. I went to the bosses and said, I would love to do travel stories unique to Arizona because I'm an Arizona native, born and raised here, and there are so many places that I still haven't been. And why not tackle those adventures and take viewers along with us, especially because we have so many people new to Arizona. And the bosses fortunately said, I love it. Go and run with it. So a couple years later, and we've done, maybe a dozen of these pieces. And so it's been really, really fun. I have many more that I want to take on. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about those today. What's next for that? I love talking about these Arizona adventures because I love talking about Arizona. And you know my favorite person to talk about Arizona, or really all things with? It's Chief Meteorologist Royal Norman.
April, how are you? Yeah, we've done a lot of traveling each other in our own little corners of the state, haven't we?
Not really together, but
not together. Right. But
although that could be fun.
Between you and me, we've seen a lot of Arizona.
It's true. So I love talking about these adventures with you. But the places that you love and bouncing ideas off of you. But you have a rich history, in Arizona for, the stories and the trips that you have covered for Channel 3 over the years.
Oh, my.
They're pretty epic.
They are pretty epic. We got to do stuff in the 80s and 90s that we wouldn't even think about doing now, like taking horses out for a week-long trip and broadcasting every day along that trip, or floating through the Grand Canyon and broadcasting every day through the Grand Canyon.
That's wild, because the technology that we have today is better for those types of things, but you guys were so ahead of it.
Well, you want to know about the Grand Canyon, which was really crazy. This is how we got live. You're right. Technology today would be easier to get a live shot out of the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We took this clunky microwave receiver or transmitter, and every day we would aim it up to the helicopter, which was hovering above us at 8,000 feet above the Grand Canyon. And then the helicopter would beam it to the satellite truck, which was on the rim of the Grand Canyon, which would beam it back to Channel 3. And so it was this, the number of people involved in us just saying, hey, we're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon was amazing. And it was really fun. Met a bunch of great people on that trip from all over the country and the world.
So what year was this?
This was about
roughly
1990, 91.
Wow.
And we met folks from Europe and the East Coast and from Japan. And it was just a blast, real blast. We had a week in the canyon. We got out a day early. The folks went all the way into Lake Mead. We got out a day early on a little cheat sheet. You can drive out at Peach Springs.
Okay.
Yeah, little known that you can actually drive to the bottom of the Grand Canyon at Peach Springs.
Really? In Mojave County?
In a car, a four-wheel car.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is actually a road at Peach Springs. Now, if you want to go and use that road, you have to pay the reservation for a permit.
Okay.
Which we had done, but you can actually drive in and out of the Grand Canyon from the bottom to the top at Peach Springs. Isn't that weird?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
It always amazes me how many people, even people who've moved here but have been here for years and say, I still haven't been to the Grand Canyon.
Oh, man.
You gotta go.
That amazes me too, because that's number one on my list.
It should be everybody's number one on their list.
Every time I think of doing something in Arizona, the canyon is boom, number one. And I think for me, I saw the Grand Canyon when I was a kid, and I kind of don't remember it much. I was 10 or 12 years old. But when we moved back to the state, and that was one of our first weekend trips, the Grand Canyon. And I have never seen a photo or a piece of video or a painting that's ever done the Grand Canyon justice.
Yeah, it's true.
It's so unbelievable in person.
And it's different every single moment. I mean, I've been there before in the mornings or in the evenings or on a cloudy day or on a foggy day or on a sunny day. And it's different every time.
Snowy days are my favorite. Some days you'll wake up and people are bummed out because it's snowing in the canyon and there's clouds and you can't see the whole canyon. And I'm like, yes, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So, the Grand Canyon is number one. And I mean, my pro tip on the Grand Canyon is wintertime, because there's less in terms of tourists. And if you want to spend a little, El Tovar is the place to stay. Just glorious.
My parents honeymooned at El Tovar. Fun fact.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
So the North Rim is closed during the winter time months. So we're talking about the South Rim there. So did that trip mean you hiked to the bottom?
I've hiked hiked to the bottom twice.
Okay.
Once on Hermit's Trail and once on what is the regular trail? I think it's just Bright Angel. Yeah. Second time you hike it, it's easier. The first time you're scared out of your mind.
Yeah,
like,
I still haven't done it.
Yeah, what am I? Yes, you should do it.
I've been to the Grand Canyon many times, but I've never hiked it.
Yeah, it's a fun trip. And you know what? You can day trip on Bright Angel. You can go down to, not all the way to the river, you can go down to the area where they used to have the little hotels and stuff. And it's not that long of a trip, but it's fun. It really is. And the weird thing about hiking the canyon, though, is you're going downhill to start. So it changes.
The hardest part is ahead of you. You think that wasn't so bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, by the way, the North Rim is pretty cool. I've been there a couple of times in the snow just before they closed it. And it is a whole different perspective. It's all, the South Rim's about, 2.5, 3 hours from here, maybe 3.5 hours from here. The North Rim's more like 6.5.
Right,
so
it's pretty far.
It's a real tough go. But if you're up there, if you're on the Kaibab Plateau, if you're up in Page, think about it because it's a whole different look. It's almost a different canyon in a sense, and looking at it the other way is really special.
Yeah, and that North Rim is really popular for leaf peeping too.
Oh gosh,
right before they closed it down for the winter.
Yeah, it's gorgeous up there.
I finally got up to 2 years ago for one of my bucket list stories. I finally got up to Locket Meadow.
Oh really?
Which was so pretty.
Yes.
Kind of a tough drive.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
I wasn't driving. The photographer was driving. But you're right on the edge of kind of a cliff heading up there. But it's beautiful. It's one of those places where you don't think you're in Arizona.
And how many places are there like that? There's a bunch,
There's
isn't there?
There's a whole bunch of them.
Where all of a sudden you look around and you go, I mean, one of the closest ones to us is Oak Creek Canyon.
Yeah.
You get down near the creek and you're walking or hiking down there and you go, huh?
Yeah.
Arizona? No way.
I know. And not that either of us are planning on retiring anytime soon, but Sedona is my spot, and that Oak Creek Canyon area is where I would just love to end up. And you're not allowed to retire. I've told you this probably every day for the last 19 years since I started here.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Do you have a spot where you think that you would maybe like to end up? If it's not the Valley, maybe you want to stay here.
Well, I've actually Oak Creek is. I love Oak Creek. It's
you want to be
beautiful.
neighbors?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But that might not be a good idea.
Maybe not. All right.
Proximity,
I know you kind of like the Happy Jack area.
I like the Happy Jack area, and I guess the other area you like. It's just a little farther is Greer.
Yeah.
I mean,
the White Mountains.
Greer for me is like, I've told you this story before, so I'm telling her a story I've told her before. But I've been going to Greer since the '80s, and every time I turn off the State Route 260 onto the 373, I just feel like the world is lifting away from me. And it's just such a beautiful place to be. And
it's special.
Yeah, it really is special. It's changed a lot in 30 years, but it's still really special.
It is the tiniest town. And so it's wild that I have also been going there since the 80s, and we never ran into each other.
No, we never did. Yeah.
Well, who knows? Who knows? Maybe we did, actually.
That's probably true, yeah.
But it's a tiny town. I mean, I grew up vacationing there, and we named our firstborn son, Mark and I named him Greer, just because we thought, what a unique name and a special place that we love going. And we still get up to the White Mountains a couple times every summer, and we love to take Greer to Greer.
Yeah.
But the White Mountains, I think maybe a lot of people don't go that because it's a little further of a drive than Flagstaff. It takes an extra amount of time, so it's not as quick of a day trip, but it's so worth it.
It's fantastic over there, and you also have all the stuff that you need pretty readily available. Like if you need to get to a grocery store, it's no more than a half-hour drive. It's not that big a hassle.
And Greer has stayed fairly tiny, even though, as you said, it's changed and it's grown. It's still stayed fairly small, but Pine Top and Show Low, they're getting some very good restaurants, and there's a little scene there.
I kind of like, and back in the old days, did you ever get a chance to stay at the old Greer Lodge before it burned down?
No, we used to go there for breakfast though, because they had the best French toast, and we used to rent a cabin just across the meadow from there, so we would trek across the meadow and go over to the Greer Lodge and have brunch there.
We had a couple of times where we actually got to stay at the Greer Lodge, and so the good thing about that is you basically kind of stay in your pajamas and robe, and you go down for the French toast. Right? Which was really great. But that was, that building was so iconic over there and so gorgeous. It's like almost a miniature El Tovar in a sense. That's how you would feel.
It's iconic. Yeah,
that's how you feel in there. Too bad we lost it.
Yeah, it did burn down some years ago. Well, let's talk a little bit about, before we get into, I have some favorites questions for you, but I do want you to share one more epic story, and this is the one of the time you ventured into, and this is for TV, into the superstitions. Because I still can't believe this happened.
We did. We decided we were going to do a story on Superstition Gold, and we hooked up with some cowboys at the OK Corral. Tom Collenborn, who has passed, was our guide, and also the Feldmans, who are still with us, were the folks who had the OK Corral.
Yeah, I met Ron Feldman recently when I did a story on finding the Superstition Gold. I really think he's the one who knows.
I think he found it 25 years ago.
That's what he says.
And he just keeps taking people out there to make a little extra. But he's a great guy, and he knows the history of the superstitions. So I didn't really know what I was getting into. It was kind of, it was May, so it was getting warm.
Yeah.
And we hop on a bunch of horses for a 5-day trip through the superstitions, and with the idea of sort of not really finding gold, but to go to the places where people had looked for gold.
Okay.
Or they had found bodies of people who had tried to look for it.
Well, that's not encouraging.
Well,
so who's on these 5 horses? Do you have a photographer with you?
Photographer. We had two backpack horses.
Okay.
Me and at least 2 guys from Tom Collenborn's group, and at least 2 guys from the OK Corral, and a fellow named Bob Corbin, who at the time was the Attorney General for Arizona.
Wow.
So he was on the trip with us. And he immediately said to us, because at the time laws were different then, he says, "Hey guys, I don't want you messed up." He says, "But I've got a 6-shooter in my saddle here." He says, "But I don't really have a carry permit." And we're like, well, what are we going to tell the Attorney General, right? So it's a true story. And he was just quite a guy, including the fact that on our first night, we all had to kind of move away from Mr. Collenborn when he was sleeping, because he was a snorer. So he was near the campfire, and the rest of us were spread out around
with the snakes and the stories and the legends out there, that's probably the least of your worries.
That's true. Well, so we, the first day we kind of went by Weaver's Needle, that famous sort of site out there. And it was either the 3rd or 4th day. It was probably the 3rd day. We were going up this one hill toward these Indian ruins that we were going up, and we're on horseback. And so all of a sudden, I never saw him, but heard him, rattling. The horse heard him too. Yeah. So the horse decides the horse is going to rear up, but luckily we're sort of on this angle on the side of this hill where I can just kind of slide off easy, so it wasn't really falling off. So I slid off, but I did lose my balance, and the back of my elbow went right into the end of a yucca.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was really painful. So we continued on the trip, and the best story of that trip was, so we got around the campfire that night, and one of the hands for the OK Corral said he was a shaman, and he could fix it. Because it was it started to swell up and everything.
And you're in the middle of nowhere.
Right, it's swelling up, and it's, it's the kind of thing where it's beating too. You can feel it beating. And so he starts doing this, whatever shaman do, humming over my elbow, and to be honest with you, to this day, I don't know whether it helped or hurt. It didn't hurt. But I decided, well, I'm going to make the guy feel better and tell him that it's doing better.
Okay.
So that was my one experience with a shaman healing my elbow. But long story short, it didn't turn out to be anything major. But it was funny.
And there was a helicopter involved, though, in this trip, too. That's how you were broadcasting the signal back to Channel 3.
Same thing. We had portable gear on the ground, which, compared to today's portable gear, was 40, 50 pounds. Wow. The helicopter would come over at a certain time at night. They'd have to be at a certain altitude above the superstitions because there was because it's wilderness, they had to be so high. And we would, beam the thing up to them, and they would beam it to, it was Tommy Heidinger, and the satellite truck, wherever he was parked, and I never knew where he was parked, and then they would beam it up to a satellite and back to Channel 3. It was the craziest thing.
It's crazy.
We talked to Channel 3 once during that whole trip. We had one of those old block phones. You've seen them on TV, right? And we got to one point where we were way on top of the superstitions, and we thought, let's give it a try, and it worked. And so we talked one time to Channel 3. But the thing that was great, we got to go to Rivas Ranch, which was an old ranch that some codger had established, where he lived there, and he lived off the ranch, and there were apple trees that were still there producing apples. And when I went there in the 80s, late 80s, there was still pretty much a ranch house there. Now I understand there's not much left. People have been taking souvenirs, so there's like just the bottom of it's left. But Rivas Ranch is crazy. You think of the superstitions as this really hot and ugly desert place. Rivas Ranch was joyous. It was like a spring day in the Midwest. So it was really fun to see that difference just in the superstitions of climates that we just went to on horseback.
And that's what I think makes, the traveling across our state so cool, because there are so many of these different microclimates, different places that I say make you feel like you're not in Arizona, but it's all Arizona. Yeah. Before we move on, I think we should give a special shout out to Tom Heidinger because, it's crazy to me that he was helping you with the technology then. He still works at Arizona's Family, by the way, and he is still the technology guru. Yes. So, when we're doing when Mark, is doing the helmet cam for Patron, he's the one out there figuring out the backpack and the helmet cam. Every question you have, everything you can, he can dream it if you've got an idea. Yeah. If you can dream it, he can figure it out. Yeah. For decades.
I could tell you Tom Heidinger stories that would make you crazy, including once at the Grand Canyon after just a regular shot, but on the satellite truck, they have things that come down to steady it. I don't know what those are called, steadying things. And one time we finished a shot and we had to be down in Williams that night because in those days we trucked around. We didn't wait around, and the thing wouldn't come up. Tom starts hacksawing this thing up. And it took him hours to hacksaw this thing up, but he did it, and he got the truck to Williams. And I was like, oh, you are a nut.
Well, Tom Heidinger, another one that's never allowed to retire from Arizona's Family. 100%. We're just going to declare that right now. All right, so some of the other spots that I've gotten to go for these bucket list ideas, Winslow, standing on a corner. We did that, which was pretty cool. Meteor Crater, I had never been to until this past year. And I took the kids, and they thought it was fascinating. And they were like, kind of protesting. You're going to take us this hole in the wall, the hole in the ground? Like, really? And they thought it was amazing. And so anybody who hasn't been there, you got to go.
Got to go. I mean, it's just fantastic. And, I got to go to the bottom once, which was really crazier.
Wow.
But it's like, it's just a part of astronomical history. And the fact that is right in the middle of Arizona is so cool.
And NASA astronauts still coming to Arizona to train. And when we were up there, I mean, there's people from all over the world.
Yes.
So when you think this is right here in our own backyard, if you haven't been to Meteor Crater, go to Meteor Crater.
Yeah, and it's not that far off the road.
We went to Slide Rock, was the first story I did, because I used to go there as a kid, but I had never taken my kids. And so that was fun. So it's a bit touristy in the fact that it's crowded. And, there's radios and it's kind of noisy, but it's a natural wonder. It's amazing.
It's beautiful.
And I love everything in the Sedona area. Went up for the Ambiente Resort opening, which is they're like these glass cubes up there in Sedona.
Yeah, okay, I've seen that.
So sometimes we do stories on new hotels that have opened too. Another one I really liked was the High Country Motor Lodge in Flagstaff.
Oh, okay.
So that is now our favorite place to stay in Flagstaff. We have gone maybe 3 or 4 times. It's really cool. So
have you ever done glamping? Have you ever done glamping?
Yes. So, kind of. We went to the Clear Skies Resorts, which is up at the Grand Canyon. Technically, I think it's in Williams. It's not a tent, though. It's like a dome. It's a clear dome, but each one comes with a telescope.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's seasonal. So I think they open in May for the year, so they should be open now. So that was another cool one.
That would be very cool.
We did the salt. We tried to check out the Salt River horses. We didn't have a ton of luck, but I think that's kind of random. When you go out there, it's very hit and miss if you're going to be able to see them or not. We saw one horse, but I was expecting all these weather photos we get in.
Yes.
Horses riding.
Horses,
surrounded by horses didn't happen, but that was cool. And then we did rafting on the Salt River, which is cool as the upper Salt River, so it's not the area where people tube. And I think maybe a lot of people don't realize, that Salt River is coming all the way from the White Mountains. And before it gets to the stretch where you're tubing, on the other side of the lakes, there's this whole stretch of this wild river that's huge with rapids.
You did that with the family just recently.
And then we did it again, because the kids saw the story and they said, we want to do that. So that, I think, is available with the rafting between April and May of every year, because that's when the snow melt happens. And so it's a brief window, but I highly recommend that too.
Yeah, I have not done that. That sounds like that would be a lot of fun.
We're coming up with Royals bucket list here today too.
Well, we'll work on that too, There's been so many, I've been so lucky, so blessed to see so many things around the state. So I did whittle down a couple of ideas.
Okay. Okay. High Country Motor Lodge we got for you.
I love that idea.
Okay. We were the first crew to broadcast live from Horseshoe Bend, which I thought was impressive until I just heard all your stories. Now I'm like, Roy was doing this in the 80s. So.
Well, here's the deal. I've never been to Horseshoe Bend. I've driven past Horseshoe Bend. Seriously, I've driven past it 100 times and never stopped. And that is on my list.
Okay, you got to do it.
Because I don't know why. We were always on the way to Lake Powell or on the way out of Lake Powell, and I never stopped.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely on my list.
So we broadcast there live during the morning show, and so we watched the sunrise, which was incredible.
Oh, wow.
But another time we stopped on our way to Lake Powell with the family, and we were there at sunset, and that was even more stunning. So.
Yeah.
Either one of those times,
Gotta
or both,
do it. Yeah,
or
I know,
both.
it's on my list.
I think Page is maybe one of our most underrated
It is.
areas in our state. I really love Lake Powell. Like, that is my ultimate everything. I mean, if I had a free weekend to go anywhere in the state, it would be up to Lake Powell and the Page area. There's so much to do between Antelope Canyon. On my bucket list is the Wave. Still working on my permit for that.
That's on my list too. The Wave. Yeah.
Been working forever and ever. You put into this permit system to try to get the lottery for that. So that's other. But I just love that Lake Powell area. It is otherworldly and it is stunning. And we went last year, 2 years before that, 3 years before that, grew up going there, and every time it's different.
It is. And it's changing all the time. And I mean, when I first started going there, you could take a boat all the way to Rainbow Bridge and walk about 12 feet and you were at the bridge.
Yeah.
Now it's like, what, a 2-mile hike or something like that? So it's changing all the time.
Depending on the water levels
so,
every year.
And I think Page itself is an underrated town. It's a nice town. Yeah, folks are friendly there. They have a lot of decent restaurants.
They're getting new restaurants, new hotels. It is. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a drive. It's 5 hours from Phoenix. So it takes a while, but you know, you stop.
Not a day trip.
No, you stop in Flagstaff on the way, and then you head on up there, and it's.
But that was always the fun with kids because they knew we'd be stopping at Flag for lunch, you know, and then we'd be rolling up the road, and then by the time we got to the Page, it'd be dinner. So you could always keep the kids moving on that.
Let's talk about some of your other favorite small towns across Arizona, and I'll tell you some of mine.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was thinking about places that I think you've got to see in southern Arizona, and it's Karchner Caverns.
Oh, that's on my list. I haven't been.
Yeah, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Please go to Karchner Caverns. I've been there a lot, and I was there when they were previewing the show before they let the public in. And I will tell you, April, that the first couple times I saw their program, at the end I was crying.
Really?
Because it was so overwhelming and the nature of it. And then, so what I tell people is definitely do Karchner Caverns, enjoy that. But then since you're down in southern Arizona, why not roll down to Bisbee?
Okay.
I love Bisbee. Bisbee's a great town. I think you've been there.
I have not been to Bisbee.
Oh, no. Well, we're going to have to put that on your list.
I know.
Bisbee.
I think southern Arizona.
Have you been to Tombstone?
Oh, I was going to say Tucson. Yes, I'm an Arizona Wildcat.
I know that. But have you been to Tombstone?
I maybe went in college.
Okay.
I've not taken the family. I have been to... oh my gosh, why am I blanking? The one that starts with W. What's down there?
I don't know.
Not Williams. That's northern. What's it's
Sierra
wine
Vista?
country. No, but it's
are you talking about Sedona?
well, it's near Sedona.
Elgin?
No, we did a field trip Friday there. I'm blanking. We'll come back to that. But yeah, in that whole area down there.
Southeast Arizona. It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous down there.
Yes.
And the last time I went was in September, which is right after monsoon season. And I mean, rolling hills of green.
Yeah,
I mean,
high, right?
The monsoon season hits southern Arizona hard, and it shows it's beautiful.
Yeah, I like the Tubac area, not for the, it's a little bit touristy, but I like the area just south of Tubac. I love Tumankakari, which is an old ruin that's south of there that is a lot like San Javier del Bac, just outside of Tucson, except this one was let to ruin. So it's like, you can kind of compare and contrast the two. But yeah, and to me, Benson isn't really a day trip. I have day tripped it, so I always try to do Benson and something else. I mean, Benson, Karchner Caverns, and something else. Yeah. And but yeah, Karchner Caverns, you gotta see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll love that.
My son just did a field trip down to Karchner Caverns, and I think they went to Bisbee and the mining tour, and they loved it. They loved it. So
it's really fun. Southern Arizona has a lot of cool stuff. I love Madera Canyon, south of Tucson. It's beautiful hiking trails, and there's water running. Even in the middle of summer, there's water running. So it's, again, one of those things where you go, am I in Arizona kind of deal? And, all the telescopes that are down there, Kitt Peak, and I can't even think of the other ones, but Southern Arizona is pretty cool. We forget about that.
Yeah, Mount Lemmon's a fun little trip up the mountain.
It's a great trip, and it's a day trip, yeah. And if you're lucky enough, you can get to ski if it's still winter time.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So your favorite small towns, you're thinking southern Arizona, or you're just thinking ones that people may not have thought of.
Yeah, I like Bisbee a lot. I've always liked the Prescott area. I mean,
I do too.
Yeah, it's just a favorite area of mine, and it's pretty close.
Yeah.
So we can access it very easily. It feels like Old West. To me, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. That downtown area, our family's favorite thing to do ever since the boys were little, and they're teenagers now. We would go up to the courthouse square and just, not pack a picnic, but grab food from one of the restaurants around and then have a picnic there on the courthouse lawn. In the summertime, it's still warm up there, but 80s, low 90s, not the 110, 120 we're seeing in the valley at that time. And it's just beautiful to sit on that courthouse lawn in the shade of those trees. There's usually some sort of little festival going on, arts and crafts or music festival. It's picturesque.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, and there's big trees there, so there's lots of shade, and I could hang out at Prescott any time of the year. Yeah. It's just gorgeous.
And
up there.
The granite dells.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are very cool too.
Interesting too that I wasn't aware when we first got here 20, 30 years ago that how much the water levels can change in those lakes around the granite dells too. So
I wasn't aware you're not allowed to swim in those lakes until we swam in the lakes. I said, you can't do that.
Yeah, they said no.
No.
Yeah. So another cool town is it's eclectic. I've stayed there a bunch of times. Is Jerome. And I love it because of the view. First of all, in the summer, the thunderstorm views, especially at night with all the lightning, is really amazing. And the folks there are nice. There's not a lot of places to stay up there, and most of them they now say are haunted. It's really weird. And in the 1980s, you go into an old hotel in Arizona, and no one ever said anything about hauntings. Now I think that's the deal. That's how you get customers.
People search that out.
Now, this is haunted. No, it's not. But anyway, it's Jerome is a great place just because it has a lot of history. And we did do a live in a Jerome mine where this is another Tom Heidinger thing. We strung over 400 yards of cable down an elevator shaft so that we could do a live in a mine in Jerome.
Wow.
Yes. So it was pretty crazy.
I think you need to find all of these old clips and put together some kind of montage, put these all on YouTube. I want to see all of these stories.
I don't know if they exist.
They exist somewhere. Tom Heidinger, where are they?
Exactly.
He knows.
Exactly.
He knows. Well, not too far from there, I think is maybe my favorite small town, and that's Cottonwood.
Yeah.
I love Cottonwood. It's an easy day trip from the valley. You have easy access to a lot of the great hiking trails in Sedona, which I love Sedona, of course. I told you I want to retire there. That's my dream spot to move to. But it's very pricey to stay in Sedona, and Cottonwood is very close by. You can take a day trip to Sedona, but there's a lot to offer in Cottonwood too.
Cottonwood's really underrated.
I think so.
Camp Verde area, underrated. There's a lot of stuff to do. Clarkdale, underrated. I love that area too. And again, great folks that I always run into. I know the Verde goes through there. The Verde River goes through there. There's lots to do.
Yep.
And it also is a real, as you say, it's a real good getting off point for a lot of sites in the area.
Yeah.
So I love it too.
Yeah. So the Verde River that goes through there, there's several rafting trips you can do. There's a water to wine one that Mark and I did a couple years ago that ends at the winery. There's a lot of wineries popping up now. There have been for years, but there's more now.
Like Cornville, right?
There's some Cornville, Page Springs, a lot of tasting rooms in downtown Cottonwood, and a lot of good restaurants going up there too. So I think I'm kind of out of my camping era, and I'm more into give me a beautiful outdoor experience, but a nice place to stay and a good restaurant. Bocce Pizzeria in Cottonwood is just one of my top in the whole state.
Wow,
so
that's
good.
Great. Yeah, I like Cottonwood a lot. I always have. And I got a whole bunch of memories from doing stuff in Cottonwood, and I will say that I love the train that you can take out of Clarkdale. Yeah, it's just a blast. It's a great day or afternoon trip, and you get to see a lot of stuff in Arizona you'd never see.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite hikes that you would recommend to people?
Well, the hike I do the most is the hike, because I live over by the Mountain Preserve in Scottsdale.
Okay.
And so I hike over there a lot.
Okay.
2 or 3 miles when I go hiking. And I also hike, by the way, not the up and down ones. I like to go the hikes that go around the stuff. So I hike there. That's my favorite in-town hike, and my second favorite in-town hike is when we lived in Central Phoenix, and it's very accessible to lots of people in Phoenix is the 100 trail that goes along the base of, say, Piestewa Peak, and it goes all the way to Tatum. And you can walk 5 miles, and there's another trail that doesn't go up or down too much, but there are times when you're walking on that you go, I cannot be in the middle of Phoenix because it's just encased in mountains and everything like that. And so I guess, my hiking trails, I do have one up in Greer, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a really short one, but it's the one where you can start in Greer and you end up on the rim looking back down.
It's not Sheep's Crossing, is it?
It might be.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I do know that it's not a hard one, but you do go up and you end up and you're looking down over the city of Greer. And so that's the one we usually do there.
I think the East Baldy Trail is my favorite in the White Mountains.
I've never been on that.
You gotta go.
Really?
It's fantastic.
Really?
It starts kind of in a higher elevation, and you wind your way down to this meadow where the little Colorado River is flowing through, and it's just beautiful. I mean, it's incredible. I think you can keep hiking. I've heard my aunt and uncle that live in that area said there's an old plane crash at the very top there that you can get to.
Okay.
We've never made it that far. I either usually have a dog or kids with me. So, and thunderstorms. That's the problem. If you're in the White Mountains in the summer months, the monsoon is very active, and you do not have as much time as you think, and you do not want to be far from your vehicle.
No, you want to go in the morning because you want to beat those storms, and you want to. You and I are of the same. When there's lightning or thunder starting, we're down. We're getting off that hill really quick. So where does that hike start about?
It starts if you take that road just past Sunrise Ski Area, and then you just go a little further, and it's on your right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a couple pullouts there for different trails, but I think it's the East Baldy Trail that we always like.
Okay. I'll try that sometime.
I would
like
you should.
To try that.
It's so pretty.
If you'll try the canyon sometime.
I will try the canyon.
Okay.
I will try the canyon. You mentioned the Oak Creek area, that West Baldy Trail or West Fork Trail is very popular. I know it's gotten kind of congested and it's tough to find a parking space, but I just don't think there's anything that beats it with those canyon walls. And if you go in October and you see the changing leaves, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and the people aren't so bad because they're all there for the same reason.
Yeah, and you're fairly spread out once you get on the trail. It's just the parking situation.
Yeah. So I agree. That's a beautiful. That's a beautiful hike. Man, there's so many of them, aren't there?
I know. Doesn't this get you dreaming about a road trip?
Yes, it does.
Also because it's so hot in Phoenix right now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So one of the hikes I wanted to do, and this, can I skip ahead to a thing that's on my list because I've never been to?
Okay, that's going to be my question. Royal, what's still on your bucket list?
Well, and I think this is a hike, but you tell me. I think you've been there. Fossil Springs.
I have not been there, but it's on my.
You have to hike.
It is.
You have to get a permit,
and you have to get a permit, and there's a waterfall at the end.
Yes.
I
definitely want to go there. That sounds so cool.
I know. The thing that has kind of scared me off from that is, the permit situation. It requires some planning, but the road is really rough.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a dirt road and it's kind of windy and you're kind of on the edge. And so I've kind of chickened out a couple times when I was set to take the kids. And then there's also, they say a chunk of that hike is in the direct sun. So that limits you weather-wise. And you and I know we never want to hike in monsoon season when that's an area that's prone to flash floods, and that can be dangerous. So that X's that part off. But then also you have the heat, and so it's kind of a small window for that hike too. But I haven't done that.
I haven't done that either. And from the pictures we've seen and get sent to us, it just looks fantastic.
And isn't that an area that we thought was burned a couple years ago in a fire, but then it turned out the area was okay, or it's just kind of
burned around it or something. Yeah, so it's in great shape. And I believe the story is that was an old area where there was an old power station, and they knocked it down in the last, say, 20 years, and that's why there's a waterfall there, and it's sort of been restored to its natural state. But that's something, and that's just outside of Strawberry and Pine. So it's not super far, but like you say, roads aren't the fantasticest, and there is a hike involved. But that's definitely on my list for sure. Yeah, definitely. You want another one?
Yes.
I think you were talking about it. No, I don't think we did talk about this. The Lava River Caves up by...
is that by Flagstaff?
Yes, they're up in the Flagstaff area, up by Snowbowl area. And there's these big, gigantic areas of caves where lava flowed through back in the day. And there are these tubes, and some of them have water in it. And it just seems phenomenal to me. And I have never even sniffed that area. And I've got to make a special trip. I think it's like a special trip kind of thing, because they're a little hard to find up there. But I would love to see something like that. Caves are cool.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. So the lava caves up there near Snowbowl would be great. And then I guess the last thing on my list, besides Horseshoe Bend, which I know you can't believe I haven't seen.
I cannot believe.
Yeah, that I've driven by a bazillion times. And this is more of an event. I would love to be able to have the time to go down to the Tohono O'odham reservation at the time when they're harvesting saguaro flowers, buds. And I would love to watch the whole process of them fermenting them and making them into their wine and going through their festival where they sing down the rains for the monsoon.
Wow.
I think that would be the most incredible experience to have, to see this culture going through this, and they literally are calling down the rains for the monsoon. And I just think that would be, hey, can I get 3 weeks off, Sybil, so I can go do that?
3 weeks.
Because literally there's a whole process involved of, picking the saguaros. And I just think that would be great because it's Arizona history in the sense that the Tohono O'odhams has been doing that since the 1500s here in Arizona.
Yeah.
So I just think that would be cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I just remembered the name of the town in southern Arizona. It's Wilcox.
Wilcox.
Yes. I knew it started with a W. It's
yes.
Wilcox because they have wineries down there as well.
Yeah.
It's all very green during the monsoon season, and it's gorgeous.
Wilcox, that area as you get over toward the Patagonias and all down there, the Chiricahuas. If you haven't been to the Chiricahuas in southern Arizona,
I'm not.
Oh man, there's great hikes there.
Okay.
Yeah. All you got to do is drive into the Chiricahuas from the east side. You don't have to go around the west side. You don't have to go all the way around to the east side. Drive it on the west side. And again, you could do this out of Benson. It's pretty close to Benson.
So how far are we talking now from Phoenix? This is about 3 hours?
Benson's about...
To the Chiricahuas?
To Chiricahuas would be, they'd be more like 4.
4, yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
So at that point, you're definitely overnighting somewhere. But you get into the Chiricahuas, there are so many beautiful hikes. And again, there's water flowing and there's beavers up there. And it's just crazy. And you're just thinking, this cannot be Arizona. So the Chiricahua is high on my list of hiking places and places to see. And I know some folks who live kind of near the Chiricahuas, and they just love it.
Oh, wow.
They just love it up there.
I bet.
Yeah. So Southern Arizona may be a place where you find Old Royal.
Okay, that'll be the place. I'll reach out to you from Sedona in my retirement and to Royal in southeastern Arizona.
Yeah. And here's the reason. I mean, it is a little warm down there, but I've spent so many nights down there, monsoon nights, where there's thunderstorms 360, lightning everywhere.
I should have known that's where you'll end up, right?
Yes. And so I'm just thinking to myself, there's a part of me that says, man, I could do that every night. You know what I mean? It's just beautiful to me. And, you see storms way south into Mexico. And it's just a great place.
Yeah.
So, I guess we could visit at Phoenix on, Hey, I'll meet you down in Phoenix.
We'll meet you in Phoenix for lunch one day.
Yeah.
Well, still on my bucket list, we've talked about this, but, maybe hiking the Grand Canyon, I'd still like to attempt. I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not my kids are ready to go with me. So I'm thinking if I give it another year or two, maybe they would want to go along and do that.
Yes.
But it feels like all of my friends or acquaintances that do the Grand Canyon, hike the Grand Canyon, they do a rim to rim, and that feels so ambitious.
No, I don't. I wouldn't.
Scares me.
I never did that.
Like, can we just start slow and do one?
Yes, you can. And like I said, the main Bright Angel, I wish I could think of the name of the stopping point before you get to the river. It just escapes me, but everybody knows it. You can easily hike that in a day. Go down, have lunch, hike back up, and get a feel for the canyon.
Because I think the thing people may not realize is that, you don't hike the Grand Canyon and come back. It's a long stretch across.
Oh, yeah.
The bottom part across is the biggest part.
Yes.
Maybe not the hardest part because you're not climbing uphill, but that's the longest stretch is 10 miles across, something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the times we hiked it and stayed in there, like we hiked Hermit's Creek one time, we camped off the river the first night, but on the creek, and then the next night we camped on the river. We just moved down toward the river a little bit, and I think we had either a 3 or a 4 day pass. So we had a couple of days in where we had to, we could just move around down there, and then we had to hike out. And for us, the crazy thing was, Course Royal, we got a huge thunderstorm hiking out, so we were sopped and wet. And luckily, in terms of the lightning, it was mostly away from us, so we weren't too worried about lightning strikes. But we came out so wet and so ready to shed our clothes, get to the nearest bathroom and change clothes. It was quite a trip. But you get out of there and you go, I just hiked the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's no better feeling than, I think, checking some of these off your bucket list. So on mine, hiking the Grand Canyon, I would like to try Havasupai, but that's very ambitious.
It is ambitious. And, you talked to Jared about that since he's done it. I got to do it sort of the easy peasy way. I'll tell you how. we're on the raft trip that we did. We stopped at Havasu Creek for a day, and then we hiked up to Havasu Falls, which was a lot shorter than having to hike all the way down. And we already had a campsite on the river with the rafts, so we kind of did it the cheaty way.
Gotcha.
But
you still got to see it.
And they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
They're unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's just, it was so, again, none of the video we took, none of the pictures I brought back with me began to justify how beautiful it was.
Yeah.
It was just that cool. So if you can make a Havasu Falls, and sometimes, you know, you can get a canyon trip. I don't know if you'd be into rafting the canyon sometime. I did it once, and I don't think I need to do it again. I'm just saying, you know, I did it.
Yeah.
But
I've had trips like that too. Like, okay.
Well, we did get to stop at that, at that point where you could walk up and see all that beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And so that made it worth it, things like that. So, definitely put it on your list if you can try.
Yeah. Antelope Canyon's on my list. That should be a fairly easy one to check off.
Yeah.
It's just that I get so sidetracked with all the other things I want to do in Page and Lake Powell.
Yeah.
I never have stopped to do it, but I need to do that. And then I'm going to keep putting in for that permit for the wave, and that's going to be something I do hopefully soon as well.
Antelope Canyon I got to do too, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like Jared's done it. I'm like, Jared, stop talking to me. I'm supposed to have done that. So
he gets pretty epic video of all that.
He gets
too.
a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I was looking down some of the stuff that I've done, like that I can't even believe. Like I had dinner once with a Hopi family up on Second Mesa.
Wow.
Dinner that they prepared for us. It was just amazing. Just Havasu Falls is on this list that I'm just checking over too, which is fantastic. Oh, Tombstone, get the bean soup at the Imperial Palace or the Palace or whatever it's called.
I love it. I love when a trip suggestion comes with a restaurant or a specific dish recommendation. I love that.
Gotta have the bean soup there, that's for sure. And that's all I have really on my list that are things that besides just in the valley, because there's a ton of stuff in the valley that's cool to do.
Monument Valley too, which is gorgeous. Mostly in Utah, but kind of in that Four Corners region. We did a story with a horseback ride through the Monument Valley area.
Yeah.
It's stunning.
It's stunning. We were lucky enough to take a horseback ride to Keat Seal, one of the reservations in northern Arizona that not many people get to, and the best part of that was we somehow had gained the trust of the folks who were our guides, and we were getting along with them. We were done shooting and we were coming back, and we were along this sandy wash that came from these beautiful ruins. And first of all, you sit in these ruins. I know you've done this too. You sit in these ruins and you think, who was here 1,000 years ago, and what were they doing? It's just so amazing. So we hopped on these horses, we're coming back, and we're just cloppity back, and then one of the guides, Bruce Hafner, was on the trip, so you know how that got started. And Bruce wasn't flying a helicopter then, but he was one of our best photographers. And, they got to talking, and all of a sudden, they're going, let's run these horses. And I'm like, wait a minute, let's run these horses? I'm pretty good at just sitting on a horse. Anyway, they got these horses going in this sand bed, and I've never been on a horse going that fast, and it was wonderful.
Wow.
Because when a horse is going fast, there's no bumping at all. And so they let us do a lot of that on the way back, and it was one of those treats that you never expect. And we got to see this beautiful ruin, Keat Seal, and have this beautiful day with these folks, and sort of friends forever, if you will. And so there's so many places you can just go, wow, Canyon de Chelly. Have you been to Canyon de Chelly?
Not. No.
Oh, you'll love that. Go and please take a trip on horseback into the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've loved this conversation, so thank you for joining me as my first podcast host today. But I do want to point out, a lot of these stories we've gone to these places as parts of assignments for Channel 3. But a lot of this is not special access. These are trips anybody can take. There are all of these wonderful tour companies across the state. I wouldn't advise doing a lot of this on your own, but tour companies that take you, and they're fantastic. The guides that we have had have been amazing, and so I hope we've inspired people to plan a trip of their own. Yeah,
do a trip of your own. Enjoy Arizona, and remember, here's the other thing, and I think we've both done. If I've gone on a trip on work and it's cool, the family's there next. So that's what we do a lot. So.
Well, I've got a whole lot of new ideas for myself. So
me too.
Thanks, Royal.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great time.
This was a lot of fun. All right. All of the April's Arizona bucket list stories that I've done, and now all these new ones that I'm going to be doing, you can find them all on azfamily.com.
This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.